Imagine if your metro system didn't just connect your city, but connected your entire region. And imagine if you could take it to the beach, too. Today we're looking at a metro system that does just that, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. These trains run in tunnels and bridges, but they also have railroad crossings. Share tracks with trams and with freight trains. They run on some tracks that were important to the very history of Europe. Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new Trains Are Awesome video. I'm Tom, and today we're going to talk about metros in the Netherlands. Now, the Netherlands has two metro systems, and naturally, one of those is in Amsterdam. Perhaps you've heard of it. Now, I like the Amsterdam metro system. It's pretty interesting. It's got a tumultuous history, and especially the new line I think is one of my favorites. Fun fact, back when I was in high school, my brother and I got to participate in an emergency drill, so we got to ride the entire thing months before it opened to the public. But Amsterdam's metro is not the original metro in the Netherlands. And frankly, I think the metro that is the first one to open is much more interesting. Welcome to Rotterdam, the second largest city in the Netherlands. Rotterdam is home to 600,000 people. If you've been here before, you may recognize that it's a little different from most Dutch cities. While there certainly are older neighborhoods, much of the city is very modern. During World War II, the city was heavily bombed by Germany. On May 14, 1940, in just 13 minutes, they destroyed almost the entire historic city center. It led to the Dutch capitulation that very same day. But to demonstrate Rotterdam's resilience and modernity, after the war, the city decided to embrace creative, new architecture. You'll notice that there are more skyscrapers here than other Dutch cities, forming part of an eccentric collection of buildings around the city. Rotterdam lends much of its fame and economic importance to its harbor. For many years, the Rotterdam harbor was the largest in the entire world, and it's still one of the most important, acting as a gateway for goods to much of Europe. The many rivers that flow through Rotterdam provide a venue for what is my favorite mode of transportation here, the water taxi. Unlike the many ferries worldwide that call themselves water taxi, these things are actual floating ride shares. Download the app, select your origin and your destination, and a speedboat will pick you up. These things cook. But for destinations that are a little more, shall we say, on land, there are other modes of transportation available. One of those is the metro. Like I said in the introduction to this video, the Netherlands has two metro systems, one in Rotterdam and one in Amsterdam. The Rotterdam one is the original Dutch subway. It opened in 1968. In fact, Amsterdam only published their plan for their metro in that year. It would take another 9 years for anything to actually open there, due to a series of protests and other construction delays. So yes, Rotterdam had a metro first. And the reason for building it was the same reason why so many other cities around the world were building subways in the second half of the 20th century. The city was getting congested. As Rotterdam rebuilt itself, it grew tremendously. While there was an old tram network that was doing its best to move folks around, the fact that these trams had to cross the Maas River across an aging bridge proved to be a significant bottleneck. Initially, plans in the 1950s called for the construction of a tram tunnel under the river, but they correctly predicted that they would end up needing something with higher capacity. So construction started on the first metro line, and at the time it was called the North-South line. It opened on February 9, 1968, inaugurated by Princess Beatrix and her husband Prins Klaus, the parents of the current king of the Netherlands, Willem-Alexander. It ran a short 6 kilometers from the central station to Zuidplein. Fun fact, during the metro's 50th anniversary in 2018, they put one of the original metro cars on display at one of the stations. I was there in my last semester of high school. Though I'm not from Rotterdam, I did go to school there, and this city has a special place in my heart. I was not a daily rider of the metro, but I rode it often enough to be very familiar with it. In those days, I had only a few hundred subscribers. But as of recently, I have over 100,000. I can't believe it. I'm so thankful for all of you. But to celebrate, I wanted to make a video all about one of my favorite metro systems in the world. Today, this system is 103 kilometers, or about 60 miles long, with 5 services: A, B, C, D, and E. You can ride the original North-South line today, and chances are, if you're a tourist visiting the city, you probably will. No longer called the North-South line, today it forms part of lines D and E. The metro has expanded enormously, and we'll talk about all of that throughout this video, but first, let's go for a ride on the original 57-year-old segment. Rotterdam Centraal is the main railway station in Rotterdam. Besides frequent domestic trains, the central station is also served by a variety of international services to cities like Brussels, Paris, London, Berlin, and Prague. From the main hall, it is an easy connection to the metro. Follow the big yellow M. I like to say it kind of looks like a McDonald's logo that ate too much McDonald's. You'll find yourself in this brightly lit concourse, where you will find ticket machines in case you want to buy a ticket. You can also just pay with your debit or credit card, or with the OV-chipkaart, which is the smart card that is used by all public transportation in the country. But say you wanted to buy a day pass, that would be 11 euros. They're also massively discounted if you buy group day passes, specifically the family one. The day pass gives you unlimited rides on the RET. What is the RET? Short for Rotterdamse elektrische tram, or Rotterdam Electric Tram. This is the company that runs the metro, trams, and city buses here. But there are also other bus companies in the greater metropolitan region, so if you want to ride those, you can also buy the tourist day ticket, which is 17 euros. But to be completely honest with you, the fares here are not that high, and you're really gonna have to travel a lot to get your 17 euros worth. Down one more level, you will find the platforms. There are 2 platforms with 3 tracks. All Line D services and some Line E services terminate here, so there usually is a train waiting to take you. If there's not, a Line E train will show up soon. The first station heading southbound is Stadhuis, City Hall. This segment of the metro is underground, and trains are powered by a third rail, very typical for subway systems from around this time period. The tunnel sections were built by digging up the street and then sinking in pre-made concrete tubes, so it was a very disruptive process back in the 60s. The next station is Beurs, the most important station on the entire network. I'll talk about why it's so important in a little bit. The stop after Beurs is Leuvenhaven, which was the first station to be completed, allowing the public in the 60s to get a glimpse of what they could expect. After Leuvenhaven, our train runs underneath the Maas River. If we were on the surface, say on a tram, we'd be crossing the magnificent Erasmus Bridge. But down here in the depths, there's nothing giving away that we're underwater, except perhaps a slightly longer distance between the stops than we've seen so far. The first station south of the Maas, Wilhelminaplein, is one of my favorites. For one, it's because of this announcement.
Let op, dit perron loopt schuin. U kunt hier overstappen op de tram. Attention, the platform slopes downwards. Change here for the tram. Station Wilhelminaplein.
And indeed, the platform does slant significantly. Back in 2020, I bought a pack of Mentos candy just to demonstrate this. But it's also the closest station to Hotel New York. This building, dating back to 1917, was the headquarters for the Holland America Line, the company that sailed ships between Rotterdam and the United States. Throughout the 20th century, thousands of people emigrated to the US aboard these ships, and the docks here were the last European soil that their feet would touch before the journey. Today, the building is a hotel with a delicious restaurant downstairs. I've celebrated a few life occasions here, including my graduation, and it was a treat to be able to take Lindsay here for the first time this past summer. But the reason why the Wilhelminaplein platforms are slanted is because this station was built on a ramp, where the line goes from running underground to running on an elevated viaduct. Normally, engineers would try to avoid building a station on such an incline, but Wilhelminaplein opened much later, in 1997, so the slant was already there. For the same reasons, these giant V-shaped poles don't actually hold the ceiling up, They push the floor down against the pressure from groundwater. The station was also supposed to feature a people mover, but instead these moving walkways were installed at one of the exits. We emerged to the surface, and for this part of the trip, I highly recommend sitting on the right for magnificent views of the Rotterdam skyline. The train serves Rijnhaven, Maashaven, and then finally Zuidplein, the original 1968 terminus. Today, all trains continue south beyond Zuidplein, but it nevertheless remains a very important station. Not only are there a large shopping center and a concert venue nearby, Zuidplein is a major bus terminal. From here, regional buses go south, some as far as the province of Zeeland. Subscribe if you want to see a video about that. We filmed our trip on one of these buses. Outbound buses board from several bus bays on the ground floor, while the buses coming into the city offload at an elevated platform that connects directly to the metro concourse. It's very well done. This has been an important bus stop for the region since the metro opened, long before there ever was a shopping mall. Now let's go back to Beurs Station, because it's time to talk about the rest of the system, all the parts that opened after 1968.
Station Beurs. Maritiem en Zee. U kunt hier overstappen op metrolijnen A, B en C en de tram.
Beurs is the very center of the system. It serves all 5 lines. It is located in the heart of the city's commercial district, completely integrated with the Lijnbaan, which was the world's first explicitly pedestrian-only shopping street when it opened in 1953, and with the Koopgoot, literally translated as the shopping gutter. Beurs is the l'enfant plaza of the Rotterdam Metro, if you'll entertain the analogy. In fact, looking at the map, I've always thought that the Rotterdam and Washington systems looked kind of similar. Sure, they're at a very different scale, but the similarities are kind of striking, don't you think? If you leave out the Washington Red Line, both have a north-south trunk with 2 services and an east-west trunk with 3 services, which branch out in the suburbs. Both trunks have 1 branch each that join each other in the south of the city as well. It's kind of cool. Anyway, after the initial opening, the north-south line was extended to Slinge, then to Zonnplaat. Then in 1982 came the opening of the east-west line. It was intended to connect the city center to the neighborhood of Ommoord in the northeast. In 1972, a dedicated bus road was built to Ommoord, which connected to the metro east-west line in 1982, when that opened from Koolhaven to Kapelse Brug. The east-west line was built to the same specifications as the north-south line. In fact, there is a connecting track between the two. The first station east of Beurs is Blaak, where passengers can change to trains operated by NS. Then the metro, which today is operated by lines A, B, and C, run through some of the wealthiest and greenest neighborhoods of the city, emerging to the surface right before Kralingse Zoom station. Kralingse Zoom is another important bus interchange, and it's where you can transfer to the Park Shuttle, a small self-driving bus system. After Kapelse Brug, Line C splits off, serving 3 stations in the neighboring town of Capelle aan de IJssel. But lines A and B is where things really get interesting. You probably wouldn't notice anything unless you were listening very closely, but a pantograph has sprung up from the roof and made contact with an overhead wire. Meanwhile, the third rail that was powering the train has disappeared. As we turn north and run on what used to be the old busway, we notice that we're running at grade on a line with railroad crossings. A metro with railroad crossings. Now we're getting Chicago vibes. This part of the metro was built as a sneltram. Literally translated, that means fast tram. Think of it as a light rail. In fact, the newer trains on the metro are a variant of the Bombardier Flexcity. Yes, that Flexity, same as the Toronto streetcar. The sneltram, with its more sober stations and grade crossings, was built in this style as a cost-cutting measure. This was not received very well by residents, but it did mean that the extension could open in 1983. A few of the older trains in the fleet can only run on third rail, so you won't see those on lines A and B. The trains that can handle both, you will. One of the important stations on the light rail segment is Alexander, where transfer is available again to NS trains. In fact, the Metro interchanges with the national railways at 6 stations, all which happen to have intercity train service. It was convenient for me as a student because while my regular commute did not involve the Metro, if the trains weren't running for whatever reason, which happened with some regularity, the Metro was a convenient backup. The second interesting station is the next one, Groskruid. Here, lines A and B split. Line A remains a light rail, making just 2 stops west at Romeinshof and Binnenhof in the Ommoord neighborhood. Just like the Yellow Line in DC, Line A only has 2 stations that are solely served by Line A and no other lines. I told you, there are a lot of similarities. Line B goes east and remains a light rail until De Tochten, which for 2 decades was the end of this branch. Trains then go back up on an elevated viaduct, switch back to third rail again, and terminate at Nesselonde, which opened in 2005. In 1997, the lines received new names, ones that they would only have for about 12 years. The North-South line was renamed the Erasmus Line, the East-West line was renamed the Kaland Line, both named after famous residents of Rotterdam's history. The Kaland Line received a major extension in 2002, when it was extended to Schiedam and then through the harbor to join with the Erasmus Line down to the Akkers. This is an interesting ride since it goes through the more industrial parts of the harbor. It also stops at a station with a funny name, Pernis. The terminal of De Akkers, today served by lines C and D, is in the city of Spijkenisse, a place you're not likely to visit if you were a tourist, but one you may have heard of anyway. It was here that in November 2020, an out-of-service metro train overran the end of the viaduct and ended up on a sculpture of a whale's tail, which most certainly saved the driver's life. Pictures of the aftermath went viral all over the world. But with that extension and the aforementioned Nesselonde extension in 2005, that was pretty much the end of any new metro construction in Rotterdam. This is what the metro map looked like in 2005. This is what it looks like today. If I just said that there were no new lines constructed, how did the metro get so much bigger? Let's go back to the 2005 map, and now let's add the national railways. These gray lines represent the lines where NS trains run. Back to 2025, and now it becomes clear. The Metro took over some of the old railway lines. Let's look at the line between Rotterdam and The Hague first. That's right, you can take the Metro to The Hague, the seat of the Dutch government about 25 kilometers away. In 1908, the Hofplein line opened between Scheveningen in The Hague and the Hofplein station in Rotterdam. This line was electrified at 10,000 volts, making it the first electric railway in the Netherlands. As you can see, this was a half century before the first metro line in Rotterdam actually opened. But as more lines were electrified, the voltage was brought down to 1500 and the line was integrated into the national rail network. It eventually fell under the control of NS, but it was never a very profitable line for NS. This was mostly because they already had a service between The Hague and Rotterdam. However, attempts to close the line failed because there was an important workshop for trains located along it. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, it became obvious to planners that automobile congestion was again becoming a real problem in this region. More people needed to take the train, but that meant that the train had to become a more attractive option. It was thought that light rail would attract more riders, and so the idea for Randstadrail was born. On June 3, 2006, the Hofplein line and its branch to the city of Zoetermeer were severed from the main railway network. Construction began to convert the line to light rail standards. That meant lowering the voltage so it would match the rest of the metro, and it also meant the construction of new stations and creating underpasses and overpasses at certain spots to eliminate grade crossings. On September 10th, part of the line reopened, now with metro trains running between Rotterdam Hofplein and Nooddorp. It was extended to Den Haag Centraal in The Hague by November 11th, a relatively quick conversion, all things considered. But the work was not done yet. Underneath the north side of Rotterdam, the Netherlands' first bored train tunnel was being bored, extending north from the central station. When this tunnel opened in August 2010, it connected to the Erasmus line, and direct metro service began between The Hague and Zuidplein station, extended to Slinge the next year. By then, the lines had all been renamed again. The Holland line became lines A, B, and C, while the Erasmus line became lines D and E, with E being the Randstad Rail service to The Hague. With trains now running every 10 minutes, ridership has grown tremendously. It is a huge advantage that the trains now run further into the city and offer connections to all the other metro lines rather than just terminating at the Hofplein station. It has allowed the suburban communities along the line to add more housing and grow significantly, and Line E also serves the Rotterdam-The Hague airport. But while the idea of an interurban metro is pretty cool in itself, the really exciting part comes once the line reaches Leidschendam station. Here, a branch from Zoetermeer joins our tracks. This line is operated not by metro trains from Rotterdam, but by trams from The Hague. Randstad Rail sought to connect both systems, and for the next few kilometers, the trams and metro trains actually share tracks and stations. But the metro trains use high-floor vehicles, while the trams are low-floor. So the stations on the shared section actually have platforms with two levels, high and low. One of my favorite things to do is to stand at the high platform and watch a tram go by. It's a funny sight to see. There is also another track for part of this section, which is used by out-of-service NS trains coming from The Hague to reach the workshops, which remain operational. The shared tracks continue until the Laan van Nieuw-Oost-Indië station in The Hague. After this station, the trams branch off onto a newly built viaduct, joining the city's tram network and stopping in Den Haag Centraal at an elevated platform. They then continue underground for a few stops before emerging to the surface and running in the street for the rest of their journey. Line E metro trains, on the other hand, they turn west at grade, before climbing up onto their own viaduct and terminating high up at a dedicated platform at Den Haag Centraal. This bright new platform opened in 2016, a decade after Randstad Rail first opened. Before that, they used two platforms below on the ground level. The new terminal also has an emergency platform in the middle in case the trams need to be diverted towards this terminal. Both Line E and the trams it shares tracks with have been branded Randstad Rail, and you'll notice that they both have a white with blue livery, in contrast to the white with red of the trams in The Hague, or the silver of the other metro trains in Rotterdam. A few years ago, they really did their best to keep the blue cars exclusively on Line E. But recently, I've noticed you'll see the blue ones on all 5 lines, and a lot of the trains on Line E don't even have any blue sets in their consists. Speaking of blue and liveries, on the silver cars, you'll notice that they have a diagonal blue and red stripe. Fun fact, the blue was actually green until 2019, when they decided to make them all blue instead. I don't really remember why they did that. So the conversion of the Hofplein line to a metro was a big success. In fact, they've even ordered new trains just this year so they can run the service every 5 minutes. It makes sense that in 2017 they wanted to repeat this success with the Hoekse line. We've come to Schiedam Centrum Station, another transfer station to the NS railway network. Travel back to March 31st, 2017 with me, and back then this station was the terminus for Metro Lines A and B. That day, I got on an NS Sprinter train to Hoek van Holland Strand, a beach station 25 kilometers away. It was the last train to ever run that route, because the next day, on April 1st, the line closed. Today, however, you can take Metro Line B to make that exact same journey. But that conversion didn't happen overnight. It was supposed to be quick, just like in 2006, but reality was a little different. Due to construction delays, issues with permits, and software issues during testing, the opening date was pushed back 5 times. The initial target opening date was September 2017. It actually opened September 2019. But now Line B runs every 10 minutes to Steendijk-Polder, with every other train continuing to Hoek van Holland. This is quite the improvement over the NS train service before the line closed. There is one major difference between this conversion and the one that was done in 2006. Line E is completely severed from the main railway network. In fact, they had to build that extra track so that NS trains could still reach their workshop. But Line B is not severed from the main railway network because even though there are no more NS passenger trains that use this branch, it is still used by some diesel freight trains. And this presented a unique problem. The freight trains are wider than the metro trains, so at stations they would bump into the platforms. Except at these stations they installed gauntlet tracks so that the freight trains have their own pair of tracks located a little bit farther away from the platforms. Despite the delays in construction, the conversion has been an upgrade to the line. I mentioned higher frequency already, but the stations have also been rebuilt, a new station has opened, and most importantly, passengers now have a one-seat ride to more stations farther into the city of Rotterdam. So Maasluis Centrum is an example of one of the stations that was completely renovated for the construction of the metro extension. The reconstruction, I should say, because we've established that the station is much older than the current metro station. Interestingly, here in Maasluis, the station name was changed to go from Maasluis to Maasluis Centrum, and the bridge nearby the station was also rebuilt. Because the bridge lifts, it used to just have no electric wires. Trains would just coast across. But as part of the reconstruction, they did build something on top, so the trains are in constant contact with the electric source. It's also great to see a bunch of new housing near a metro station. So we already know that these tracks are old, that they used to be a train line before they were a metro line. Did you know that they used to be incredibly important too? Not just nationally, internationally. We're on our way to Hoek van Holland. In English, this place is called Hoek of Holland. But Hoek in Dutch doesn't mean hook, it means corner. And if you look at a map, you can see why it's called the corner of Holland. This railway line opened in 1893, making it the oldest segment on the entire metro system. Also in 1893, ferry service began between Hoek van Holland and Harwich in England. And for decades, taking the train to Hoek van Holland and then transferring to the ferry was the way that people from all over Europe would travel to the United Kingdom. There were no airplanes after all. The ferries depart from Hoek van Holland Haven station, translating to harbor station. And it wasn't just domestic trains that served this. It was international trains from all over the continent. The Rheingold from Germany and trains from places as far as Poland and Russia all used this line to go to Hoek van Holland so that their passengers could then travel onwards to London. That's right, we're on a small little subway train now that is using tracks that were once used by Russian trains. The line also played an important role in the years before World War II, when Jewish children could take the train to Hoek van Holland and travel onwards to the United Kingdom, fleeing mainland Europe. Many railway lines carry some historical significance, but this one to Hoek van Holland I think is one of the most important railway lines in Europe. At least it was. Of course, air travel made it much quicker for people to fly to the United Kingdom, and then in 1994, when the Channel Tunnel opened, that made it faster to take the train to London as well. And so international trains stopped serving the Hook, but for a while, domestic intercity trains, or boat trains as they were often called, continued to run to Hoek van Holland Haven. However, in 2007, those trains stopped running as well, and from that point on, the Hoekse Lijn, as it's called, was exclusively served by local NS trains.
Station Hoek van Holland Haven.
Now, back in 2017, the trains ran one stop beyond Hoek van Holland Haven, to Hoek van Holland Strand, translated to beach. But upon the reopening of the line in 2019, the segment from the harbor to the beach did not reopen along with the rest of the line. This was because the old beach train station was located some 900 meters away from the actual beach. not super convenient. To fix this, the Metro created that 900-meter extension so that the eventual beach station, once it would reopen, would actually be by the water. It took another 3 years to build this section, which is partially single track, but in 2022, you can now finally take the Rotterdam Metro to the newly reopened Hoek van Holland Strand station, which is literally right on the beach.
This entire train emptied out. I guess it's just me going to the beach.
Station Hoek van Holland Strand. Final stop. Don't forget to take your personal belongings and your litter with you. Thank you for travelling with RET. Station Hoek van Holland Strand.
Of course, it started raining the moment we arrived at the beach, but honestly, that is the quintessential Dutch experience. I don't know if my other Dutch viewers can relate, but my family used to always go to the beach when it was really stormy out. Actually, that's why I've never been to this beach before, because we lived pretty close to one, so I never made it down here. How cool is it though to just be at a metro station and walk a few hundred meters and you can dip your toes into the sea if you wanted to do that for some reason. And it used to not be the case. There used to be a beach station back when this was a train line, but that was farther away from the coast than the metro station. This is brand new. You can stand at the water's edge and still see the yellow M. Ultimately, even though the conversion took too long, I think having it be a metro rather than a train was an upgrade for people because there's more frequent service, there's the new stations, it's cheaper, and I think most importantly, you now have a one-seat ride to a lot more destinations in Rotterdam.
So that's the story of the Rotterdam Metro. What started as the Netherlands' first underground railway grew to become a regional transportation system that brings people from all over this part of the country into Rotterdam. The fact that it has several suburban branches which all come together to make main trunk lines in the city center of Rotterdam does mean that frequencies are limited, a similar problem that the Washington Metro faces on its interlined sections. 6 trains an hour on the branches means 18 trains an hour in the shared segments. As demand continues to grow, the Rotterdam Metro is looking towards automation to be able to run higher frequencies. In fact, the new trains that are being ordered will have the ability to be automated when the Metro chooses to pursue that option in the future. Longer-term future plans could include the construction of a new line as well as the conversion of more NS lines in the directions of Leiden and Dordrecht. Now, officials at the Metro are pretty eager to make those conversions happen, but I don't think any of the other parties involved are very excited about that, so I highly doubt it will happen anytime soon. The Rotterdam Metro is a fascinating system, and if you're into transit at all, there's lots to appreciate about it. But it's just extra special to me because of all the memories I have here. Almost every trip I've ever taken on the Metro here was with dear friends, whether we were celebrating the end of our final exams, going to the lake to swim, going to birthday parties, or just commuting to school together. The Metro is where we shared some of our funniest jokes and most heart-to-heart conversations when we were teenagers. When I think about the people that I'm grateful for, it's hard not to think about the trains that I'm grateful for too. Speaking of gratitude, we reached 100,000 subscribers recently, and I'm so thankful to each and every one of you that has become part of this community. I cannot believe I get to make videos about trains, and so many of you enjoy them with me. It is an honor. Thanks for watching today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so, and we'll see you next time.